And welcome back to another exciting edition of Money Talks. I'm your host, Michael Thomas, here to talk with some of the top folks at USDA in the state of Pennsylvania. Very excited to introduce Curt Coccodrilli. He is the State Director for USDA Rural Development. And we've also got Liz Bell. She is the State Director for the Housing Programs at USDA. And we can't wait to hear what they have going on there. And Curt, Liz, welcome to the show, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Michael. We're honored to be on the show. It's always a pleasure when you have an enthusiastic host like yourself, and I look forward to hopefully getting on your show many times over the course of the time I'm dedicated with here at USDA. I am the State Director for Rural Development, which is part of USDA. I'm an appointee of President Trump, and I work for the Trump administration in Pennsylvania as the State Director. Rural development is multifaceted. Usually people think of USDA, they'll think of Farm Services or NRCS with the programs that they have there to help farmers out in soil conservation, or you think of the meat inspections. We have very little to do with any of that. We are basically a bank, or set up like a bank, to loan, grant, or guarantee money or combinations thereof over 40 active programs at any given time. And a lot of that comes out of the Farm Bill, and we get our marching orders from Secretary Perdue down through our Deputy Undersecretary Betty Brand and the national office. So the national office basically is set up to support the field, of which there's 46 counterparts that I have, and some states have multiple responsibilities, like Vermont, New Hampshire is one, and then Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, one state director has that. So it's an incredible job. I'm honored to be here. My focus is economic development as it relates to rural housing, rural utility service, and our rural business service. So through that lens, we have the other programs that filter down through that, of which we'll get into the weeds on here as much as you guys want.
Excellent. Thank you. And Liz, tell us a little bit about your background and what you do at USDA.
Yes, my name is Liz Bell, and I am the Housing Program Director for USDA. I work in the Housing Department for the very low housing program. Also do multifamily housing. I've been with the USDA agency for about 5 years.
Great, fantastic. So yeah, let's just kick it right off. I mean, here you are at USDA doing some very important things, both in rural communities, developing them from an economic perspective, and also from the housing perspective. We were just talking about before the call the importance of really having those things together, and here you two are together on the show. That's a great sign. In the past, I'd heard at USDA there was a lot of initiatives around opioid crisis and really addressing that in rural communities. What are some of the hot buttons today, some of the big initiatives that USDA, both from a housing perspective and just a rural development perspective in general, are focused on and really trying to make kind of happen in the near term?
Well, we have some exciting programs, of which one of the focuses is distance learning and telehealth. Some of those awards will be coming out shortly, and I'm really excited to say that in the next week or so, we may be able to get those announcements out. But we have an application period that still is not closed yet. So we will be working on that in DLT. But when you look at what's happened out there, especially in healthcare now under COVID and some of the restrictions that we have in Pennsylvania, the only way to get treatment is from home to a healthcare worker, whether it's a social worker or medical personnel. And some of these awards, especially in the DLT and Community Connect that will be coming out shortly, the application window is coming up in the fall, it allows somebody who needs treatment from the comfort of their own home to get that care. So I'm hopeful that we will have some exciting news coming up in DLT to help those affected most by the opioid crisis. You know, Pennsylvania was devastated, and we know the numbers have gone down over the first from 17 to 18, but now under COVID, you know, not all the numbers are in because you can't get that data, but it's a concern, and that program unto itself can really help the communities that need it the most. And they generally, you know, the rural communities don't always get the same focus as urban centers do. And these programs were designed to help those communities fight against that terrible crisis.
Great. So to be clear, the telemedicine, is that a financing tool, or is that more of a support tool? Like, what's USDA's involvement in getting these communities telemedicine support?
Sure, that would come from, for example, if we have a hospital that applied for the DLT grant, what they do is they'll spoke it off to recovery centers, or one of the housing projects that you mentioned here that we helped out in Tioga County, Harbor House, and Harbor House Counseling. What a setup they have, but they can literally from the hospital talk to some of the patients and the social workers and nurses on staff in those facilities to help the addicted recover.
Great. That's fantastic. And Liz, how does the housing program work in these cases where they're going into the rural communities and helping support housing development? Just give us an idea of some of the programs that are available under USDA housing.
Sure. So we have a very low and low purchase program. We also have a 504 program that's for repairs. We give grants for repairs to anybody 62 and older. And then we have our multifamily housing program that has rental units for low, very low, and moderate income.
Great. And that's a topic near and dear to some of our viewers here. So I'm just going to ask a little bit more on that. What are those programs, and can you give us an idea of interest rates or leverage that are available, and how many dollars, you know, roughly a year or put out, or, you know, how many loans are done? I mean, how active are those programs at USDA?
And I could start just from the top line. Liz and I were talking about this just yesterday. You know, what does the portfolio look like in housing here, and what did we do in 2019 and versus 2020? You know, where are we trying to compare from last year? With some remarkable new dashboards that have been set up so we can look at this almost in real time as they come in. So it's remarkable work that our innovation center is doing. It's a charge of the secretary to get that data, but close to 300 applications came in the 502 direct. The total housing portfolio was over $600 million for Pennsylvania last year. And then if you tack on the multifamily housing work, we were close to $700 million throughout the multifamily housing and the single family housing direct and guaranteed portfolio. So it's a remarkable number that can help a phenomenal amount of families, you know, get a little leg up, especially in these down times.
That's great. Liz, anything to add to that?
No, yeah, we just it's fantastic the reach we have with the rural community and helping low-income housing families meet their dreams of home ownership or even just having a place to live. One of the things with multifamily housing is to reduce homelessness in Pennsylvania, and it's nice to see that we're able to do that for the rural community.
That's great.
Yeah.
What's your average unit size in a rural community? Is it under 50? Is it, do you have an idea? Are they across the board?
Yeah, they're pretty across the board. I mean, we have 50 to 60 units. Some of our units even go up to like 140, 150, depending on the location. So yeah, it varies by county.
Great. And you were mentioning that there are 100% loan to value. Is that right? That seems almost too good to be true.
Yes, for our single family housing, it is 100% loan to value. And depending on when the appraisal comes in, we can even help with closing costs if the appraisal comes in higher than the purchase price.
Great. And then on multifamily, do you know what the leverage would be on those typically?
To build new construction with our 538 guaranteed program, we go up to 90% for profits, and then we go to 97% for nonprofits as
Wow.
a guarantee for the banks. Yes.
Wow. And what would an interest rate be on that, and how long would that be fixed for in today's market?
For housing, our direct program, the current rates are 2.75. For the
Wow.
repair, they're 1% for 20 years. The guarantee, the rates are dictated by the bank.
Okay, got that. And then isn't there another rural development program, the 538, and there's one more? Is that right?
Yes, we have two guarantee programs. The 538 is our multifamily housing guarantee, and then we have a housing guaranteed program for purchases.
Okay. And are they comparable in terms of pricing and leverage?
Yes, they're both the same as far as 90% guaranteed with the bank. And then the multifamily is the only one that goes up to 97% for the nonprofits.
And how long is that rate fixed for again?
For the life of the loan.
And is that, I'm sorry, is that 35 or 40 years? I forget which.
Oh, for single family housing, it's 33 years, but we can go up to 38 years in certain circumstances. For the guaranteed, the minimum is 25 years, and the max, I believe, is 40 years.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so with leverage like that, Curt, all the grants that you provide, the infrastructure, I mean, it seems like the question is, what doesn't USDA finance rather than what do you finance? Because it seems like with your financing instruments, you could literally build an entire community, everything from government resources, infrastructure, broadband, fire departments, things like that. I mean, that is a pretty incredible option. How do more people get into this space to develop in rural communities?
Well, the starting point is getting our messaging out to folks like you guys, posting our website onto your site, and we'll get all that information at the end of the show here. And I like to use Twitter, and we're trying to boost that following now. And I put Amber on that one to see what that looks like. But really, marketing. My job as an economic developer to talk about these incredible programs. It was before COVID. I was out on the street in every corner of Pennsylvania, from Erie down to Greene County on the West Virginia border, over to Newcastle on the Ohio border, in Scranton, Tioga County, Potter County, Wayne County, up in the northeast corner. If I'm not out doing my job, trying to get the great message of rural development programs, I'm not an economic developer if I'm not out there. And I demand that of our program directors and our area directors. We have regional area directors as well, to get out and market the program with your specialists. So one of the focal points that we have is getting that messaging out. And if we're not talking to communities, for example, last week I was with Secretary Ben Carson with HUD, talking to an amazingly diverse group of real estate developers and housing professionals and stakeholders right here in Harrisburg. The same day President Trump came in, and some of the congressional folks were not there, but getting the messaging to the congressional folks, the state legislators, working as a federal family with HUD, with SBA. We have a memorandum of understanding with SBA, where their lending kicks off around or ends around $4.5 million. Our B&I, business and industry guarantees, can pick up at that point up to $25 million. So it's things like that really we try to work together. With Department of Energy, we work there, and we just did a rural business development grant for a town of Waymart, Pennsylvania. It was about $100,000 RBDG grant to bring in to the community of Waymart, Pennsylvania, gas lines that they didn't have before. So, the energy efficiency, and that came through they could utilize to upgrade those heating systems with the 504 grant program from housing. So those are the things that if you don't connect all the dots, you're never going to be able to do your job correctly if you don't see the bigger picture. And literally, rural development can build a town, a rural community from the ground up, from the water and sewer program right on up to buildings and industry. We can help in get the infrastructure into a business park or a community. The rural utility service, you can do smart metering. It really is remarkable when you tie it all together and look at what we've been gifted with and blessed with at USDA's rural development.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's great to hear, and it makes me excited actually to hear that you're out there asking for business. That I love to hear that. I love to I love the idea of really promoting the programs. As my other day job as a HUD insured mortgage lender, commercial mortgage lender, there's quite a barrier to entry for development specifically. You don't have to have done a HUD loan, but they really like to see experienced developers. I mean, heck, every lender on the planet wants to see somebody that's had a success story. I think that's probably fair to say. But are there any differences in USDA? Because the reason I ask, you're more in the rural communities, you're more in the smaller space, you're looking for people to put these deals together. What kind of supports do you offer to people that are newer to the types of development, maybe in those local communities? And are there training or mentorships available to bring people that are burgeoning, if you will, in the development arena into the program and utilize some of these benefits?
Sure, and that's the partially the job of our area directors and our specialists to get into these communities and market to them. I'll give you an example, and it's interesting that you brought up the HUD portion there. We haven't touched on opportunity zones yet, but 23% of Pennsylvania, is eligible in rural communities for opportunity zone work. So trying to talk about them, and then can we get into the technical assistance? There's grants and technical assistance for our water and sewer program, for example. We have additional points that we'll put on if it's in an A zone do, and we just did one that was in an opportunity zone that had state director points added to it for the development and extension of a runway up in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania. But these are the things, I'm trying to give you examples that can be replicated across the country. So every state has very similar programs to us. There's some nuanced differences here and there depending on the state regs, but our job is to get that messaging into those communities and try to expand out. I mean, Congress bless us with this funding. We're out there trying to get that funding back into the communities that entrusted us with it to begin with. And I'm not doing my job if I'm not doing that full time, all the time. And that's the type of thing that I am trying to instill in all of our program areas. And our team does a fantastic job. Amongst the whole COVID problem that we've had over the last 4 or 5 months with a lot of the shutdown, you see a lot of the economic recovery now just eking back in. Everybody's a little timid, but I'll tell you what, our obligations are really on track to where we were, even though we had that most of our workforce become remote now, temporarily, until we get through the state's guidelines on phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But still, we're out there, and it's remarkable to see the uptick in the housing sector. It's really great for those people that are really trying to establish themselves and utilizing our program. So that
sounds great. Yeah, that sounds like there is support there, and there is encouragement with technical support in these areas to get more people utilizing this type of financing. I'm glad you brought up opportunity zones, because I earlier this year closed the first HUD 242, which is a hospital loan in Grand Junction, Colorado, in an opportunity zone. I was very excited about that, and glad that incentive rolled out, because it did save the borrower a little bit of money on application fees, as you know. I was curious, because I know USDA under community facilities does finance hospitals, and frankly is pretty active in what we call the critical access area, 25 beds or less. Have you seen any opportunity zone funds or investments come together that want to build these types of facilities and use the community facilities financing. Because honestly, with the tax incentive plus the higher leverage and the long-term fixed rate, low fixed rate, it seems like it could be a really great incentive to build more hospitals in rural communities.
Yes, and that's a great point. We have interest almost weekly. I'm astonished to see how folks have migrated to us and have heard about our messaging in that space. There's some things that I cannot talk about. Obviously, they're in the development stage, but suffice it to say, I'm excited about the prospects moving forward. As you know, the rural health divide from urban, people now, especially in these times, don't always want to migrate to the urban areas to get their health care. But what we have seen is an uptick. And I'll give you an example. One of the most interesting funds, and the one that really got marketed itself nationwide, it's the gold standard of opportunity zones, is in Erie, Pennsylvania. They really have taken the ball from day one, formed a group of dedicated stakeholders in that community. And I think the last time we were out there a few months ago, they were close to $300 million in that fund. And wow. What happens all of a sudden is you get interest. Can we get into some of these really towns that have been neglected over the last 50 years, with the downfall of manufacturing in the Rust Belt? So suffice it to say, is that a tool for these types of facilities? Yes, we do. I mean, a large portion of our guaranteed and direct loans are in the healthcare space. And suffice it to say, we really try to help and guide them as best we can through our lens.
That's great. That's great. Liz, how hard is it for a new developer, maybe without as much experience, to get one of those rural development loans that you were mentioning for constructing multifamily housing, affordable housing?
Yeah, it's not too difficult. We partner with PHFA with the 4% bonds, 4% and 9% tax credits. We do have them respond to the NOSA, and we walk them through the whole process and let them know, what they need to do to get the loan approved and what's needed for the project. So we help them through the whole process, especially when we know that they're new to the industry.
Yep. And you're speaking about, for our viewers, applying for tax credits, which then provide the equity that is needed to develop affordable housing. I'm curious, do the borrowers come to you first, or do they have to go apply to get the tax credit money first? What's the typical order of things in that case?
Well, normally they come to us to learn more about the program itself. And then we do ask them to speak with PHFA about the tax credits, so they could see if they would qualify for either the 9% or 4%. That helps reduce the amount of loan that they would have to borrow in constructing the new multifamily housing complex.
Sure. And unlike the tax credits, I mean, your program is not competitive in any way. As long as somebody qualifies, they can get that loan. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we have an extended NOSA for that program as well. The NOSA is actually open till 2021. So the difficult part is getting the tax credits from PHFA. Right. But with our program, yes, if they qualify and they meet all of our requirements and they score high, they are eligible for the guaranteed program.
Great. And just as someone that's interested in the program, that's watching this episode and wants to learn how to develop, whether it's housing or infrastructure or something in a rural community, what is the next step? Since you are a direct lender for some of these programs, would they be reaching out directly to someone at USDA?
The answer is yes. And what we could do is post a website, if we can work on that as the show ends, but usda.rd.gov/PA. And the backslash, you can add your state on for your viewers, if it's West Virginia, /WV. So that's how you get a hold of us. And we will also send a link to our contacts here in Pennsylvania and our national office to disseminate it out to the other states.
Great. Yeah, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Thanks for saying that, Curt, because we are a national show. We have viewers all over the country. So I think I'm correct in saying that if someone is to go after USDA financing, they are going to be going with their state branch of USDA to apply for that. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. And
Okay,
some
but
of the programs, I was
yeah,
going to say
sorry.
some programs have a national office component.
Right.
Multifamily housing, we've been in transition and piloted from the Northeast to the national office. So there's still a little bit of gray area, and we need a little bit more work there, and it really should be working like a well-oiled machine. So we're excited about that opportunity there to deal directly with our national office. A fantastic program. We hope it'll be around for quite a while.
That's excellent. Yeah, and as we mentioned before, HUD is experiencing on the multifamily side unprecedented volumes right now. So it's nice that there's some additional capacity, it sounds like, with USDA to pick up some of that volume as well for housing.
Yeah, our Secretary Perdue always says we want the most efficient and effective federal agency, and we want to be the most efficient and effective agency in the federal government. And really, some of these realignments were designed just to that end.
That's great. That's fantastic. Well, Curt and Liz, thank you so much for your time. I mean, is there anything else you want to share with our viewers specific to USDA, or have we pretty much covered your hot topics for today?
We've covered quite a few. I just want to say, always think of USDA when you can. If you're thinking of HUD or SBA, remember USDA rural development. We could build a town from the ground up. We can help farmers out with our value-added producer grants. We have rural business development grants. We have our REAP grants that were just awarded in the last week. So really, it's a heck of an agency, rural focus, and our employees, they're second to none. We really are dedicated to the cause of rural communities and their well-being and health.
That's great.
So to get a hold of us, again, rd.usda.gov, Pennsylvania, /Pennsylvania, and our Twitter account. This is my favorite. I have our public affairs person always, where are we on Twitter? I have a little competition with some of the other state directors to try to boost our Twitter following. And that is @RD_Pennsylvania. @RD_Pennsylvania.
That's excellent. Hey, I love it. And the fact that USDA is, again, out there looking for rural business, looking at the banking markets, commercial banking, a lot of the big banks have gotten out of rural markets. So love it that there's a lender that wants to do business, is asking for it. Liz, was there any last thing on the housing front you wanted to give us?
No, I just wanted to encourage people to go to the website, check us out, because we are available and we're here to help. And just want to thank you for having us today.
Hey, it was my pleasure, and I'm sure it's our viewers' pleasure to have you here. We do look forward to inviting you all back, and I thank you so much for coming on this edition of Money Talks. It's been a great one. I know I've learned a lot, and again, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks to your viewers.
Thank you. Wow, that was an informative and interesting episode. Great to have Curt and Liz, both state directors from the state of Pennsylvania, on our show today. Learned a lot about rural development, housing development. Very nice to see a lender out there asking for business in those communities. We know we need that type of financing across the country. So very excited to have them here. Did learn a lot. Hope that you did. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another exciting edition of Money Talks. I am your host, Michael Thomas, signing off.